Hi, my name is Jazzy. Welcome back to me, talking about movies. Today we're going to be talking about Disney's Encanto.
Many years ago, this candle blessed our family with a miracle. Our house, our casita, came to life with magic.
Encanto is an animated musical Disney film directed by Jared Bush and Byron Howard. The script was written by Charise Castro Smith, and the songs were written by Lin-Manuel Miranda. This is Disney's 60th animated film. Just to give some background, I actually saw this movie in theaters. I saw it with my friends Lisa Marie and Micah. Lisa Marie, by the way, looks a lot like the main character, Mirabel. So I'm glad I got to watch the movie with her since I knew she would love it. The film is set in Colombia and is about a family called the Madrigals who live in a magical casita. The family is magical as well, and each family member born into the family has their own unique gift. The only exception to this is our protagonist, Maribel. Oh god, I called her Maribel. I have a cousin named Maribel. The only exception is our protagonist, Mirabel, who unfortunately didn't receive a gift on her 5th birthday like her other family members did. Mirabel tries not to let this bother her and make the best out of her situation.
Gift or no gift, I am just as special as the rest of my family.
Who wants more cake?
All right, guys, where do I drop the wagon?
Maybe your gift is being in denial.
However, when the family's magic appears to be fading, Mirabel decides to take it upon herself to figure out what's going on so she can save the family's gift. When I saw the first trailer for this movie, I was immediately looking forward to it. As someone who grew up watching Disney movies, it made me really happy to see Disney making one starring a Latina lead, especially one voiced by Stephanie Beatriz, who I love. If that name sounds familiar, you probably best know her as Rosa Diaz on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, who is a vastly different character than Mirabel, so you'd be forgiven not to recognize her voice.
I'm sorry you screwed up my case. I'm sorry you're a terrible cop. I'm sorry for your goat face and your rodent brain and your weird goose body. I meant all of that. I hope you feel better.
I love Mirabel as a protagonist, and I think a lot of it has to do with Stephanie Beatriz's performance.
When's the magic gift happen?
My cousin's ceremony is tonight.
What's his gift?
We're gonna find out.
What's your gift?
Who's asking?
Us?
Well, us. I can't just talk about myself. I'm only part of the amazing Madrigals.
I'm also glad to hear more of her singing voice in this movie. I first heard it when I watched her in the Heights, but it's featured a lot more here. I also love her character design, especially her glasses, although I might be a little biased there. I don't just love Mirabel though, the rest of the characters are great too. I really appreciate how the film featured a multi-generational family. The Madrigals consist of the family's abuela, her children, and her grandchildren. Abuela is the family matriarch and is in charge. Mirabel lives with them all, including her cousins, which is pretty common in Latino families. As a result, Mirabel's cousins are almost like her siblings, and her tío and tías are kind of like secondary parental figures. As someone who grew up in a Latino family, this is very accurate. When I was growing up, I spent a lot of time with my cousins, so in a lot of ways they were actually like siblings to me. Every member of the Madrigal family is interesting, and you just really want to learn more about them. Luckily, we do get some insight on most of the characters, particularly Mirabel's sisters Luisa and Isabella. Most of this is done through song. I do want to do a Latinas in Media episode about the female characters of this movie, so I'll go into more detail about their characters there. The movie does a good job of setting certain expectations for Luisa and Isabella's characters, and then having us realize there's actually more to them through Mirabel's eyes.
I think you're carrying way too much.
Maybe I overdo it.
The character designs in this movie are also very impressive. I'm glad that they made the family very diverse, not only when it comes to skin color, but also hair type, body type, and even facial structures. This might be one of the few movies that actually showcases how diverse Latinos really are. Usually movies that have Latinx characters will really only have them look a certain way, usually with tan skin and dark hair. And while that is very common with Latinos, we don't only look that way. This was the case with Disney's last movie that featured Latinx characters, Coco, which is an amazing movie, by the way. And yes, while a lot of us do look like that, it's not the case with everyone in our community. and it's not usually reflected in media that features us. Representation for Afro-Latinos, especially ones with darker skin tones, is practically non-existent. Keep in mind, I'm mostly talking about American media. Mexican media, for example, is a whole other beast. This is starting to change recently with In the Heights and West Side Story, although In the Heights had its own problems that I'm not going to get into here. Anyway, that was just my long-winded way of setting up how much I appreciated the Afro-Latinx representation in this movie, and just diversity of different types of Latinos as a whole. Not even just with background characters, but also even family members of the Madrigals. Most of the family members are part indigenous, while others like Dolores, Camilo, and Antonio are part Afro-Latino thanks to their father Felix. Afro-Latinos are very common in Colombia, so it's good that they were able to show an accurate representation of that. As a whole, the family varies in skin tone and hair color. There are also members of the Madrigal that are darker skinned and some that are lighter skinned. And personally, I think it's also very realistic to show different skin tones even within one family. For example, in my family, a lot of us vary in terms of skin tone, hair texture, and hair color. Like, for example, my mom is someone who naturally has tan skin and dark hair, while some of her sisters actually have lighter skin and lighter hair. So overall, it's just really great to see different types of Latinos being represented in this movie. And I hope this becomes more common in media that features Latinos. Since this is I put so many S's. Since this is a Disney musical, I have to talk about the soundtrack, which is catchy as hell. It's probably no surprise if you're familiar at all with Lin-Manuel Miranda. And I know some people are sick of him because they feel he's overexposed and they find him kind of cringe.
Tim Kaine in the membrane. Tim Kaine in the brain.
But I think he really outdid himself here. I've been listening to the soundtrack over and over again since I watched the movie in theaters. This is one of those rare Disney musicals where I loved every song. I also liked how each song was able to reveal different aspects of the characters' feelings and also move the plot along. My absolute favorite song, though, has to be We Don't Talk About Bruno. It's probably the catchiest song, and it just features a lot of the cast's voices beautifully. I also like how it starts to build up towards the end.
We Don't Talk About Bruno is the family gossip song. That was really exciting because every verse and every stanza, we got to meet a different character, and they're all kind of riding the same musical landscape, but they ride it completely differently.
As I kind of talked about earlier, Luisa and Isabella both have songs that are catchy, but also have lyrics that cut very deep. Especially Luisa's song, which will pretty much be relatable to anyone who's ever been anxious about not living up to other people's expectations. Also, I appreciate that most of the female vocalists in this movie are altos or mezzo-sopranos. No offense to sopranos. The writing in this movie is amazing, especially the jokes. There were several moments where I laughed out loud. And not in that fake way where you say LOL just to relieve the tension in a text message or to make it seem like you're not actually mad about something, but you are. Like, I actually laughed out loud. Also did a good job of integrating jokes during emotional moments in order to allow moments of levity, and not in a way where it's very clumsy or forced. The jokes never overpower the emotional moments and take away from them. Speaking of the emotional scenes, those were also very effective. The movie did a good job of allowing us to sympathize with each character. This is especially the case with the family's abuela, who is probably closest to being the movie's villain without actually being the villain. Throughout the movie, abuela cherishes the family's miracle that gave them all their gifts. She's also very insistent about everyone using their gifts to help the town. Unfortunately, it becomes more and more apparent how much her pressure is actually affecting the family. Toward the end of the movie, it gets revealed why she put so much pressure on the family in the first place, and why she cherished the miracle so much. I don't want to spoil too much, but it's a very beautiful scene with no dialogue and just has a song called Dos Aruguitas, I hope I said that right, playing over it. I would probably compare it to the opening scene of Up, only even more devastating. I thought it was very impressive how the movie was able to use a piece of Colombian history and weave it into the story, especially in Abuela's backstory. It's very subtle, so you might not be aware of it, but if you are, it makes the scene even more impactful. Just to provide a bit more context, the movie alludes to a time in Colombian history called the Violence. It was a time in history that caused a lot of Colombians to flee from their homes. If you want to know a little bit more about this and how it was tied into the story, Jose Maria Luna wrote a great article that discusses it a bit more in regards to the movie. I'm going to link it in the description. To me, Abuela's insistence that the family utilize their gifts to be helpful to the town kind of reminded me of Latino families that often put pressure on younger generations to work hard and be model citizens. Growing up in a Latinx family, you're often expected not only to do well in school, but also exceed in it. I also kind of saw it as Abuela being afraid that if the family didn't utilize their gift to help the town, that they could possibly one day turn on them as a result. The reason why a lot of Latinx children are pressured to excel and be model citizens is so this way they are less likely to face discrimination. I'm glad that this movie shows how, while a family might have well intentions for the younger generation, it can often result in the younger generations facing emotional problems as a result, and how that can negatively affect them and the family as a whole. At one point, Mirabel tries to explain the emotional problems that the family is experiencing to Abuela, but she's not willing to listen. To me, this kind of reminds me of how sometimes older generations in Latino families aren't super considerate of mental health issues. However, this movie shows how important emotional problems are and how important mental health is and why it should be considered. So as you can tell, I really love this movie. It just makes me really happy to see a movie that features a culture that's very similar to mine. After Coco came out, I didn't really expect Disney to make another film about Latinos, but I'm glad that they did. I can't wait for my nieces to see this movie and see someone like Mirabel on screen. And while I do love this movie for its representation, I also think that this movie can be appreciated pretty much by anyone, even if you're not Latinx. There's just a lot for everyone to enjoy, from the music, the storytelling, the characters, and of course the animation. So let me know your thoughts. If you loved this movie, if you didn't, what your favorite song was. Anyway, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.
Adios.